Now it's time to start building the structure of our portfolio. But before we do that, let's take a look at an example of how we're going to make our layout. So I'm going to toggle over real quick to Firefox, and in our portfolio section, I'm going to open this up in a new tab, and I'm going to scroll down, and we're going to take a look at some portfolios here real quick. Let's take a look at Uting's. Why not? Let's check out Uting's portfolio. Okay, so we are going to create essentially a one column centered layout. And a one column essentially means that there are no divisions within our main body here. This is just one column, it's just one area. There's no sidebar or two sidebars or anything like that. We are essentially centering our piece within a page, and so if you look at the different sections that we have in the portfolio, we have a header, we have a navbar section, we have a content or main section, and then down here in the bottom we have a footer section. And what creates this centered look and keeping everything within our what's called a container, we're going to create what's called a page wrapper. So all of these different things, the header, the navbar, the content main area, are all contained within what's called a page wrapper. And each of these sections is a div tag. And a div tag is essentially an abbreviation, if you kind of want to think of it this way, as like a dividing container. And this allows us to create different sections or a layout for a web page. So the first one we're going to actually create is going to be this wrapper tag, everything that will go inside of it. So I'm going to tab over to Dreamweaver real quick again, and we're gonna style this wrapper so that it's centered. But first, before we do that, we need to think about how wide we want to make our page. The width of the page is really kind of be dependent upon the media that we're going to show it on, and we're not going to do anything fancy with it, like create alternative style sheets for viewing on a mobile device or a pad or a phone. We're just going to create a simple fixed width one column layout. So with that being said, we want to make sure that we're meeting or at least catching almost every device resolution, every monitor resolution that we can. While there are probably still not very many CRTs out there, there are some, and so we're going to set our width up to be about 900 pixels. So that'll pretty much fit on just about any screen out there, and if it is on a mobile device, it should scale down appropriately for us. To start our styling, we first need to create an ID, and to create an ID we need to start off with the pound symbol. And that's how we create or name an ID. An ID is a selector. If you remember a couple videos back, we talked about the different types of selectors. An ID selector is often used for div tags, layout type components. And the general rule of thumb is that you only use an ID once on a page, and that's a general rule of thumb. It's not necessarily it's kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean and the pirate code. These are kind of more like guidelines. Rules can be broken, and in this case it can be broken, but generally standard practice is you only use an ID once, and that's why they're generally used for div tags. So we're going to name this this container just wrapper. I'm going to make sure that it's all lowercase, and make sure you get that pound symbol in there. That's how HTML, that's how the browsers know that this is an ID. IDs always start with a pound symbol. Then I'm going to open up a curly brace and hit my enter key, and I'm first going to start off with the width of this page, and so I'm going to type in width, and you'll notice that as I type in width there, my code hinting comes up. I just need to select width, and I'm going to type in 900 pixels for the value. Now to center this page, to center this div tag, rather, it's not a simple command or property as, say, center. Browsers don't understand what that means. So in order to center a page, we adjust margin values. So I'm going to type in margin, and you notice that as I type in margin, there's different ones. There's margin, just straight margin. There's margin bottom, margin left, margin right, margin top. So I can address each of these margin values in turn separately, or I can select just margin and do this what is called in shorthand. So I just hit the return key, and here's how this works. When I write this in just using the margin here, the top value, the first value, is this one. So the top, if you look at the top up here, that's this number. That's the first number, top, and then it goes next, right, and then down here, bottom, and then the last number is left. So to make a page centered, the right and left margin values need to be at auto. So I'm going to type in auto. So this one is right. The next one is the bottom, so I'm going to make this one 0. And then the left is also auto. So this is how this works. This is the top, 0 pixels. Right is auto. Bottom is 0. Left is auto. Now I can actually shorten this down even more, but I wanted to illustrate like how this works in terms of the order of these values. But to shorten it down, since I have two of the same values, I have 0 for the top and 0 for the bottom, and auto for the left, and then auto for the right, I can actually shorten that down to just the 2. So now this 0 represents top and bottom, and this value auto represents right and left. Okay. So next I'm going to hit the enter return key, and we're going to go ahead and give our wrapper a border. You can always go and change this later on, but I want to do this so you can kind of see how this looks in the page, and so you're not missing out on the form of this layout. So I'm going to type in border, and again, like margin, border has some of the same options, and you'll notice that there's border bottom left radius, and that's for rounded corners. If you scroll through, you will see border bottom, border top, border right, border left, etc., etc. Okay, but I can also shortcut this just like I did with margin. So I'm going to say border and select that, hit the return key or enter key, and hit space. And the way this works is you type in a value and a style and then a color for the shorthand. So I'm going to type in, we're going to do a 1 pixel solid. That's the type. So if I back up here and hit the space bar, you'll notice that there's thin, thick, dash, dotted, double, groove. Okay, we're just going to do a simple solid border, and the color is going to be black, and we're going to do this shorthand again. So I'm going to do the color. Remember, we bring back our pound symbol. So when I hit the pound symbol, our color wheel gets selected, but we're just going to do a simple black border. I'm going to do that in shorthand as well, and so they're just going to use 3 zeros instead of 6, and then end that with a semicolon. Then I'm going to hit return and close that off with a right curly brace. And that's all we have to do to create our wrapper in terms of the styling. But we're not quite done yet, because right now if I were to go and design, view, and preview this, I have no wrapper in there. Nothing there yet. And the reason why is because I haven't actually put the wrapper in a div into my source code yet. So I have to go back over to my source code, and now I have to put the HTML part of this in so that it will display in terms of the content. Remember, HTML displays content, CSS changes the look of the content, how it looks and how it feels and all that kind of stuff. So all HTML content goes within the body tags. So I'm going to place my cursor right after the body. I'm going to hit enter a couple of times so I have some room. And you notice I left myself with about 3 spaces. Okay. And the code for HTML is slightly different than the code for CSS. So instead of curly braces, I'm going to use carets. So I'm going to type in a left caret, and you'll notice my code hinting pops back in. I'm going to type in div. Remember we talked about divs. Divs are essentially containers that create a layout form for us. Then I'm going to hit the space bar, and you notice I have some more options again in my code hinting. I'm going to type in ID, and it's a good idea to actually hit return to let the code hinting finish it out for you, because when you hit ID and hit return, you'll notice that it has div ID equals and then quotation marks. So, and there's our wrapper that we just created, the name that we just created for our container in the CSS style sheet. So if I hit enter return again, it's going to automatically place it in there for me. And I need to make sure that before I move on, I need to put the right caret in to finish that off. Okay. The cool thing about Dreamweaver is that with the code hinting part of it, it finishes these things out for us. If we were to do this in Notepad, we would have to type this all out by hand. So it makes it a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient using Dreamweaver in this way. Remember that anytime we open a div tag or any kind of tag, mostly we have to close it. So I'm going to hit the return key a couple of times because again we're going to have stuff that goes inside of this. So I'm going to hit my left caret and then I'm going to hit the / button, and if you don't know where that's at, just look under the question mark there and then just hit the / button and there it goes. It completes it, auto completes it for me. Okay, you'll notice that our little numbers on the left hand side are turning red, and then it went away just a second ago. The reason why it's turning red is because it's alerting you that you haven't completed the code correctly, and as soon as you do that, if your code is clean and correct, those little red indicators will go away. Okay, so now if we check out what we have in our design, click over, you'll see a little box there at the very top. And right now there's nothing in it. There's no content in it, so it's very small. So if you place your cursor in there, it's going to be really difficult. So you come back over to code here and go ahead and type in hello world without anything in there. Just do that. And then click back over to design. You're going to see your little box, okay, with hello world in it. So this box, what's nice about the way we've done this, I'm going to delete hello world out there. The way we've done this is we've set the wrapper to expand as our content fills it. So if you click over to our CSS style sheet, you'll see that we've limited our width to 900 pixels. So our width, our content can never get larger than 900 pixels inside of our wrapper. But we didn't limit it by the height, and by default it'll expand as long with as much content as we need to go inside that. We could limit the height of it, but then we would have to insert some kind of we'd have to tell it to expand with either like a scroll bar or something like that. And if you want to know how that works, we can go over that in another time. So at this point we have a few more we're going to wrap up this section of the tutorial. The next one we're going to insert the header div with a background, then we're going to insert the nav bar div, and then the content main, and then our footer, and then we'll go back and then finish out our navigation bar as well. This is just the first part. We have some more divs to go.